are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on reducing contract cheating, challenges and solutions. My name is Gretchen Hansen. I am a senior product marketer at Turnitin, and I am thrilled to be joining today with Dr. Thomas Lancaster and Dr. Irene Glendinning, and they are going to share with us a really great presentation all about contract cheating and the challenges we're seeing with that, as well as some things that we can do to get involved, especially coming up with our International Day of Action Against Contract Cheating, which is this Wednesday on October 16th. And so there will be a lot of information about how to get involved with that and how to start to spread the word about this, this challenge and see what you can do on your campus and in your community to help with it. So before we get into the presentation, just a little bit of housekeeping for us. I am recording today's presentation. We're going to be sending it out to you in an email within 24 hours, so be looking for that. Feel free to share that email with your friends or colleagues who are not able to attend today. We'd be more than happy to have you watch that after the presentation. If you have questions or comments, we would love to hear them. There is a questions area where you can go ahead and type in your questions. I'll be reading those and fielding them over, but also Thomas and Irene will also be able to see your questions, we hope. So if you have them, please let us know. We'd love to see what you've got to say and make this a very interactive session. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Thomas to kick us off.
Right, well, thank you, Gretchen. Great to be with you again. It seems like we've done these webinars a few times now, but for everyone joining us, we're taking a slightly different stance with this one to kick off what's the week where the 4th International Day of Action Against Contract Cheating falls. And so we really want to talk about why contract cheating is important, but also what you can do about it. One of those things is taking part in the activities on Wednesday. Even if you're not registered yet, it's not too late. You can also join in a individual capacity, but also to look much more widely at why this is such an issue and why we're so passionate about addressing it. So if you've not met me or Irene before, I work at Imperial College London. My main role is teaching related, but I'm involved in a whole host of things. I'm a computer scientist by background, and I've been researching plagiarism for a long time now, in my 20th year, dating back to my PhD. But for the purpose of this webinar, published the first paper on contract cheating with my now retired colleague, Robert Clark, and it's an area I've been passionate about and working on ever since. We've also got Irene with us. Irene, do you want to just say hello?
Yes, hi everyone. My name's Irene Glendinning. I work at Coventry University, and my role is largely these days, I'm working part-time. I'm researching into different aspects of academic integrity and corruption in higher education.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Irene. And we will be sharing the presenting duties as this webinar goes on. But why we're here is we are so excited about the 4th International Day of Action Against Contract Cheating. It takes place this Wednesday. So in some parts of the world, it's little more than 24 hours away. And I say it's the 4th one, 4 years in a row. Those are some of the types of activities we've seen in previous years. Coventry University, where Irene is, and I used to work, has had great events every year. Student Union really involved there. We've got lots of people pledging their allegiance to to stamping out contract cheating, such as the College de Paix USA there with these whiteboard pledges. That one says you can fool the world, but you can't fool God. But whatever reason for stopping contract cheating is what we're keen to hear about from different people. And I said this is a third in a series of webinars. So we've done 2 previous ones. The slides are online, the videos are online. This particular webinar, we're looking much more generally at the issues. So if you have joined us before, don't feel that you're just going to get a repeat. I'm sure there will always be some things we can't help but say, but I try very hard to not plagiarize myself as we go through these. So here are a few of the things that we're going to cover in this webinar, particularly what is contract cheating. Look at quite a few different activities which we now think of as forming part of the contract cheating problem. There looked at some of the marketing behind the industry. One reason we have to take action now is because the contract cheating industry is so pervasive and it really presents itself to students in ways they can't possibly avoid. And relating to that, how the students are encouraged to contract cheat. I'd like to think that most students don't set out on a course and think, I will buy all my work all the way through and I will get a degree, which I really haven't earned. So there are things we can do to stop this. And this is what Irene has got particularly going to come in and look at contract cheating deterrence and contract cheating detection. And there are all kinds of different methods we can use. And then finally, just remind you again about the International Day of Action Against Contract Cheating, which you may have gathered by now is coming up on Wednesday. So very excited about that one, as I mentioned. But really kick this off by saying contract cheating is not just somebody who's found someone online, they do an assignment for them, the assignment gets handed in and the student never hears from them again. It's a really developed industry with students being marketed at continually and receiving offers continually from the same places over and over again. And for students, really hard for them to avoid these offers. Hopefully they can avoid taking up the companies on their offers, but they can't avoid them entirely. So here are the kind of things that you might see if you're a student. These kind of very elaborate websites, essay mill websites, things like this one, Ninja Essays, the kind of catchy marketing techniques these sites use. And you could replace the word ninja with many other types of people, many countries, many academic subjects, and you can find an essay mill or a contract cheating service on that using that moniker to advertise itself. And you look at Ninja Essays there, they're trying advertising to students, buy from us, it's going to cost you $19.99 for a page, discount off your first order, really promoted themselves to students. But what do you do if you hire that ninja? Then you end up with a contract cheating service writing your work and you are contract cheating there. So just by hiring somebody, in my opinion, you are going too far, because how can this be something that's legitimate in an academic circle to do when we're trying to assess an individual student's ability and knowledge to complete a course and show that they're prepared for industry after that point? So a very rough and ready definition of contract cheating is where a student gets someone else to complete assessments on their behalf, which they then submit for academic credit. And I'm adding the second part slightly reluctantly because, in my opinion, and it's something that's a little bit debated, as soon as somebody gets someone else to complete their work, they are cheating. Because who knows if they try and cheat and decide not to hand it in, or they get cold feet at the last minute. Now, whether we choose to go and penalize that student, if we even know about it afterwards, is really quite a grey area there. Is simply requesting an assignment an offence? So if, as I've seen in my research dating back for quite a few years, somebody goes on a very public site and they put up a request saying, I want my assignment completed on the Statue of Liberty, or whatever particular type of assignment it is, regardless if they get any responses, or regardless if we see the results of the responses, then to me, that is an attempt to contract cheat, because it's a student who is setting out to deceive us there. But it may be a grey area in terms of regulation and processes as to whether requesting an assignment is an offence or not. But let's put that to one side. Let's look at this very persuasive industry. And here is our completely real site, Ninja Essays, that you can find on the web. This is not an advert for them. They may be brilliant, they may be terrible. They probably use the same set of end writers after a long chain as many other sites. But this site is filled with persuasive tactics encouraging students who've ended up here to buy from them. And have a look at that for yourself. But some of them they're saying 100% privacy. So if you buy from us, then you won't get caught because we're not going to reveal who you are. They're giving a very high quality score from a high number of customers. Now, whether that's legitimate or not, whether they make those numbers up, who can say? but they are claiming lots of completed orders per day, lots of professional writers working for them, whatever a professional writer means in this context. But there are people who make a living out of writing assignments for other students. They're saying students did very well from this work. So that's some of the reasons, but they're also offering other things that are convincing, like a telephone number to contact them on, online chat if you don't really want to talk on the phone to somebody and you prefer to talk to them in person. They're saying they can do things very quickly. If you were to expand that drop down from 10 days, you would see this will let you return things on the same day there. A coupon code there, 15% off your first order. And there are all kinds of guarantees that you can't see on that page, details of other services they offer as well. But that's not just it, because all kinds of pop-ups appear as well. So the site will sign up to give you notifications, as so many sites do now. So that if you accidentally click yes, you will get updates in the corner of your screen continually saying, are you struggling with an assignment? Do you want a special offer? Can we help you today? All those sort of support type terms designed to hook students in. They also try and capture students' email addresses by offering them gifts. These tend to be money off vouchers, probably better than the 15% there. So that's the kind of one you see there, special first time client offer. Because of course, once they have a student's email, they can contact them again and again and again. And it's all about making those contacts, and through the power now of social networking, encouraging even more students to become involved in this growing network. And the persuasion tactics don't stop there. If you're a hunter for this particular company, you can find all their social media sites where they advertise what they're doing, and they can connect with individual students. So there's, for instance, a Twitter and a LinkedIn account. I'm clearly not connected with them, so they are a third-degree connection. But I must be able to go through 2 friends and be able to connect with this site, because these people do have followers there. Even better discount code on that site. They're offering 25% off on there. So there's all kinds of ways to do that. And they use the power that any legitimate business will do to generate customers. They also have marketing funnels. So I'm not going to go into this as sort of marketing 101 in a huge amount of detail, but if they can get people to refer customers to them, the person referring the customer will get a commission. And so this looks like it's part of a website reviewing different contract cheating services, but actually it gives, if you were to read through it, quite a biased review, 5 stars, 10 out of 10 points, and there's a link to click. If somebody looks at the review, decides this is a good service, clicks on the link, then the site referring them to Ninja Essays will make a commission. And these commissions can be quite a large percentage. So somebody is paying $200. It could well be that the person referring this gets 100 of that. I don't know the exact percentages for this company, but they are paying out a lot of money to acquire customers using all kinds of different techniques. And that really is just stretching the surface about how much money is involved in this industry. We are talking hundreds of millions of dollars a year now going through the contract cheating industry. And these are what I would call quite legitimate marketing techniques that sites are using. But many of these marketing techniques are nowhere near as legitimate. Some of them are. But we see things like physical marketing, giving out business cards to students, putting up flyers in universities or posters on university notice boards, particularly if it's open access, or lampposts near universities. Any way to get this message out to students, giving away free gifts, that kind of physical marketing techniques there. We see companies befriending students on messaging services such as WhatsApp and social media services such as Facebook or Instagram. And how these companies are working is they're not befriending them saying, I'm representing an essay writing firm. They're befriending them by pretending to be another student. And so imagine a student who has just joined a course or who is preparing to join a course, doesn't know anyone. They're trying to establish a network to make some friends before they go. And they make these online contacts from someone else who looks like they're also joining that university there. can often be quite a good-looking person as well, but that's just the way these services work. And what they'll do is these services will befriend students, they'll send them messages, they'll ask them how their day is, they'll work out when they have a deadline or when they feel stressed, and they'll say something like, well, I found this really hard too, but I found these people who helped me. And they'll do your assignment for you. It doesn't cost much money. Why do you give them a try? And they will hook the student in by pretending to be their friend. It's a very deceptive business practice, in my opinion. We are seeing companies hiring students now to represent them. So students have access to lots of places inside universities that the companies don't necessarily have, particularly if there are access gates or security arrangements. But another student who can tell their friends, they might get a refer a friend bonus from this. They might get a free essay if they refer a few friends. But they pass that message out and they convince other students that they need to hire these people. And likewise, there are services that look like they're not contract cheating. For instance, they might say they're offering proofreading services, copy editing services. They might say they're offering you extra tuition. But when you sign up for these, then you end up getting a push to just buy your work instead from this particular person there. And of course, that is not to say there aren't many completely legitimate proofreading services out there that students can use, but there are a lot of places that are using this either directly to bring students in or as part of a funnel. It's a separate part of their business, and the proofreading service turns out to be owned by a company that also writes essays. So, as I said, it's an incredibly complex industry, and the reason it has become so complex, particularly over the last 10 years, is there's such a lot of money involved. You can go online now and you can buy guides which tell you how to set up your own essay mill, or which give you the software you need to set an essay mill up, or which give you access to a pool of writers used by other companies, and you pay a commission for using that pool of writers. It's a sort of ready-made business, and people look at this and think it's a get-rich-quick or a make-money-online type scheme. I suspect the money is not now, it's a very competitive business as well. It's not as easy for somebody joining that business to make as it used to be. But individual writers can still connect directly with students and make a lot of money that way. I sometimes use the term essay mills because that's sort of a long-standing phrase that has been used. But essay mills really services writing essays, but they could be providing other types of work. I tend to think that contract cheating is more than just essay mills. And good time to throw this out as a question for everyone who is joining us. Hopefully I will be able to see the answers because Gretchen has worked some magic in the setup. How else can students get original work completed for them other than going through an essay mill? Feel free to use the chat box and type in whatever you think your ideas are, and I'll share a few of them in a few minutes along with some of my own. So let's see what we've got, and of course you can feel free to use the question box as well. So other than going to one of these services which completes work for students, such as an essay mill, how else can students get original work produced for them? So the kind of work which we would call contract cheating. So if you see a chat box, just go ahead and type in your answer there. Or is it too late in the day? It's early evening in the UK. I'm not sure quite where all our attendees are from today, from around the world. So we've got a lot of names with us. That's great. A few people I recognize. Thanks for joining us today. So I'm not seeing a massive amount of answers tonight, but maybe we're all tired, or maybe I'm going through this fast because there's always such a lot of stuff to cover. But here are some of my answers for this, the kind of places students can use for contract cheating. It's not just commercial services, and right at the top of that list are friends and family. So people who know the student, who want to help them, who are going ahead and completing this work. So it could be it could be a brother, a sister, a father, a mother, any family member doing this. It could be a friend on the course or off the course who thinks they know this material. And quite a lot of the stuff we teach at university level is, at least in the first year, not that advanced, and so it can be suitable for other people to help out. It can also be another current student. It can be somebody on the same course who ends up writing or creating two versions of an answer. So one for them, one for themselves and one for a friend, perhaps for free, perhaps not. There. We've seen a few examples recently of former students as well, both former students on a particular course. When a student gets to an end of a course, they're very well equipped in how that course works. They know what the type of assignments are going to be on the course. They know what kind of things lecturers on the course think is good work. They've probably, at least if they've done the final year of a course, the early years is very easy for them. And they know what will get people results. They also have connections directly to the group of students who are continuing on, because quite often they can still access the university. And so we see people setting up a business, some of them in the UK, some of them international students who go back to a country where setting up a business like this can be very profitable for them, helping people on a particular course to cheat. I sort of mentioned local tutors earlier on, so people can sign up with somebody advertising through a local service, a local classified site such as Craigslist, offering tutoring services, and they can be drawn in then to find they're actually buying the work. Some people even offer these choices of services in their advert. We saw an example in the UK a couple of years ago, which was all over the news, where somebody was managed to get access to a university as a tutor for students who had extra individual needs, and so were due to have additional sessions. But that tutor was then filtering these people. He was being paid by the university to provide extra support, and then admitted to the BBC that he was filtering them into his own contract cheating service and saying, well, why do this work for yourself when you've got me there? So not everyone working in an educational setting is necessarily completely legitimate themselves. And we're also seeing all kinds of independent writers who are connecting directly with students via various means. Now, I've shown you an essay mill. There are hundreds more online. But who's to say if one of these template type sites, however catchy it looks, has got a whole big group of people behind it, or if it's just got one person waiting at the other end. So those are just a few methods. There are more, but contract cheating really goes back to that definition. Student getting anyone else to complete the work for them. We tend to think of it mainly as being a commercial transaction, but it involves more than just money in so many situations. And as I've seen in my research, it can involve trades in non-monetary goods, and it can involve people just doing work because they don't want their child or their friend to fail, because there's a huge cost of failure in a university setting. One more reason why I don't just use the term essays is that contract cheating doesn't just cover essays. One thing I would do as a result of this webinar, if you don't do it already, I would encourage you to be creative with your assignment types. You make it slightly harder quite often for a student to hire somebody to do contract cheating, but you also make the assessments more interesting for the students. You discourage them from going to an external service because they're engaged with the course. But you can buy all of the things on this slide online, many of them through these services which we would call an essay mill or an essay writing service. But you can buy exam answers, particularly for some of the services as a sideline, say, send us last year's exam paper and we will prepare you a set of perfect model answers. They do that because they know that exam questions or very similar questions get reused. But you can also hire people to be at the other end of a hidden microphone, a hidden earpiece, helping to provide answers during a live exam setting. It does happen. It came out very strongly in work that Irene and I did in Southeast Europe, where we spoke to students there. You can hire people to do major projects. So you may think that it would be hard to get somebody to complete a dissertation or a project report or something much longer. actually it tends to be relatively easy people to hire, because these cost a lot more money, and firms can, individuals want long-term business. They want to know they've got work coming in, just like all the rest of us, particularly freelance workers. And what you see there quite often is firms supplying a report a chapter at a time, which a student will then take to their supervisor, get feedback, and the contract cheating service will go ahead and improve. There are all kinds of maths you can buy. This is quite basic work. I published a paper recently with Alexander Amigud, and we looked at the type of requests made online for work. They're visible on Twitter, and a huge amount of this was basic maths and students who were struggling with the basics, but they had no problem finding people who could do this work very easily, because for them, for many people, basic maths is easy. You don't even need a good standard of English to do this work. All kinds of other things, designing surveys, business reports. You can get presentation slides prepared for you. You can get all the script that goes with the presentation. So always be slightly suspicious if you see a student giving a presentation and is just reading a script off. There are many other assessment types available for you. So there are solutions about making sure that multiple types of assessment are used, that students can't keep cheating in the same way over and over again. But it's just to be wary that saying we have essay mills and essay industry is not the complete truth, and there are many assessment types that are specific to individual academic disciplines as well. So that is the problem, but there are solutions to this, and at this point I'm going to pass the control of the microphone over to Irene, who's there to talk to us particularly about how we can detect contract cheating and how we can deter students from taking part in this activity.
Hello everyone, and thanks for that very interesting talk, Thomas. I'm just looking at one of the questions there that someone asked, one of the answers that someone gave. What better way to demonstrate your delegation skills for an MBA than to assign it to your intern? Thanks, Brian, for that. It's very, very pertinent. So, detecting contract cheating. So this slide here, what I've done here is I've just divided the process of detection up into 5 stages. In practice, it's actually a lot more than 5 stages, but let's just have a look at what we mean by detection. So it starts with a suspicion. Typically, a marker will find a suspicion, and we'll have a look at what the options are for the marker in a few minutes, but let's just look at what the process might be. So if the marker decides they want to pursue this suspicion and find out more, the first thing they have to do is to collect evidence. That takes time and trouble. So, yeah, there is a difficulty there. So someone's got to be really committed to want to collect the evidence. At some point, a decision needs to be made by somebody as to whether the evidence is good enough. Depending on what your local procedures are, that might be the same person. It might be up to that one person to decide whether or not the evidence is good enough, and to decide whether or not it's to apply a penalty. So that is the least bureaucratic way, is if it's down to the one person to make that whole decision. And although that may sound to you a rather light way to deal with this case, believe me, in some institutions that is what the process is. In my institution, the evidence is collected by the marker or by the person who wants to bring the allegation. And if that person doesn't have very much time, then that is a good reason why they might give up at that point. Collecting evidence that is strong enough to take it forward to some kind of hearing is very hard. And what we have is we have a viva process, and I know a lot of other people do the same. So we have an academic conduct viva that we can use to bring the student in and talk to the student. And that is conducted, it's chaired by an academic conduct officer, someone who's trained to do that job, but also that the marker themselves will ask the question. The academic conduct officer is there to make sure the process is fair. And that can produce new evidence which will either clear the students of any wrongdoing, or might be sufficient evidence to bring it forward to a hearing. So if it's contract cheating, it will go to a panel, and the panel will make a decision. If the members of that panel are not sufficiently experienced in contract cheating, they might not think there's a problem there. So, for example, we know that the text matching tools are not very good at detecting contract cheating because the SA mills, these companies, that's one of the guarantees they give. They make sure that that any works produced is so-called plagiarism free. And that just simply means that the text matching tools don't show any significant amount of matching on them. And an inexperienced member of a panel might think that that's a good sign that there's nothing wrong with the work. So it's important that people are trained in finding out and understanding what kind of characteristics contract cheating will have. So at some point a decision needs to be made on whether the allegation and whether the evidence is strong enough to uphold the allegation and look at any other evidence that's available, and then eventually to make a decision on what the penalties will be. Now, in my institution, if it's a first offence and the student is fairly new to the institution, they may be given a lighter penalty. But if they're an experienced student, or if it's more than a first offence, then the student will be expelled from the institution, which is a very strong penalty. But I know that doesn't happen in a lot of institutions. So have a think about what I've just said there, and tell us what your experiences are. Is that similar to what would happen in your institution? Is it very different? Do you think what I've described is a fair and robust system? Do you think there are, am I right in saying that those 5 different stages I've described there are reasons at each of those stages why the whole process might fail? Either the marker might decide it's not worth the effort to collect the evidence. They don't want to go through all that bother for all sorts of reasons. It could be that the panel might decide the evidence isn't strong enough. And there we're having a look, we'll talk in a minute about what the balance of what the burden of proof is within those kind of cases. It could be that the penalties are made light, or the panel decides that the evidence isn't strong enough, so the student is allowed to get away with it. So there's all sorts of reasons there why we might not end up upholding a case where a student has genuinely used contract cheating, and that will deter markers from taking the trouble in the first place to raise cases if that happens. Okay, let's move to the next slide. So in the next slide, let's just look at the marker and look at the decisions the marker has to make. So the marker may not even notice that there's a problem there. And that sometimes happens if the marker is not working in their first language. So they might not notice the nuances in the languages, and might not see any problems with the work. They might not understand what kind of characteristics there are within contract cheating work. Or they might identify it, but decide it's too much of a problem. Or they might decide not to pursue it because it's not normal in their institution to pursue cases like that, and they would be out of line with what happens with the rest of their colleagues. Or they might decide to investigate in some way. Or in the fourth case, they might deal with it locally. So they might just decide the easiest way is just give the student a low mark. And if that goes against the regulations within our institution, then the student has a perfectly legitimate right to appeal. And certainly in my institution where that's happened, the students will get away with it altogether. So it's not a good idea to actually go against the institutional regulations. So let's just assume that the marker decides to investigate the case. So they may find some evidence. They may have to take it to someone else depending on the local regulation. So it might be that they take it to an academic conduct officer who says, can't see a problem. Turnitin scores very low, it's not a problem. They might not understand what the issues are. Or they might not think that the evidence is strong enough to take it forward. assuming that the whatever process is being followed, it goes forward, there is a possibility that the case is rejected at the next stage by the panel. Again, it might be to do with not enough evidence, or perhaps the case will be upheld. But you can see there are lots and lots of stumbling blocks there, and lots of reasons why some of these cases don't get through all the different hurdles that are put in place of that marker. And it's a huge job for that person to take that case through. So one of the things we look at is how we can perhaps relieve that burden on individual academics and individual markers. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So what I've looked at on this slide is, why don't people report cases? Because we know that the first stage is actually getting the marker to come forward with the case and identify that there is a problem or there is a suspicion. First of all, is academics are really busy people. So if this is a part-time member of staff who's just paid to teach, are they going to put that amount of effort into uncovering some evidence where they're not necessarily going to be thanked for doing it? So workload is one of the big problems there. I mentioned already, perhaps the teacher is not a native English speaker or working in the language that is their native language. It could be that they've got very large classes and they don't really know most of the students in the class. So they won't identify whether a student is writing something that's atypical. It might be the first piece of work for the student, or maybe the student is using the same contract cheating agent, or the same ghostwriter throughout, so they won't actually see any difference in the work. The third point, it's very hard to find any evidence that is considered by many to be substantial evidence that would hold up it against a panel, that would be seen as being concrete evidence by members of the panel, that could go on to uphold the case. It could be that you're working in an environment where it's not normal to follow cases like this, in which case you'll be an unusual case. You'll be seen by colleagues as being difficult or causing problems. You'll be seen by the students as being difficult and causing problems as well. So the environment that you work in is really, really important. And it's very difficult to go against the norm when you're in that kind of situation. And Thomas and I have been in situations, certainly the research I've done, I've come across lots of situations where people simply ignore these cases because they're far too difficult, and no one else is dealing with it either. So in that situation, it's very hard to go against the grain and take it forward. So if you're convinced that at some stage down the line, it will be just thrown out and you'll be told that there isn't enough evidence, that is a really big disincentive. So the more likely you are to have a case taken forward, the more likely you are to put in that effort to get that evidence together. Now, the burden of proof I just mentioned earlier, and certainly there are two levels of burden of proof that we use. And in my institution, for cases of student cheating, we look at not the stronger one, the beyond reasonable doubt that's used in courts of law, but we look at the balance of probabilities. And I think there is a problem there with people not quite understanding what that balance of probabilities mean. If your institution doesn't state what the burden of proof is, then you really ought to make that very, very clear, because otherwise your regulations are not complete. But assuming you're going with balance of probabilities, certainly I think there needs to be more clarity on what that means and how and what level of evidence you would need to produce in order to meet that requirement. Some of the excuses people use for not following up on any kind of student cheating or any kind of misconduct cases are they're afraid to upset students. And certainly in some situations, I have been, certainly recently, I've done research where people have said that the parents will come in and make trouble if you upset the students or you accuse students. And you'll also get other students who will gang up on and sort of side with the other students and make accusations against you, which are generally false, but will actually cause problems for you as an academic. Here is an interesting one, the second to the last bullet point here. How many institutions are there where your teaching quality, your ability as a teacher is graded or assessed in some way on how many students pass or how many students get higher grades? So would you really want to fail some students if that was going to impact on your own grade as a teacher and might result in you questions being asked about your ability? So that to me is a perverse disincentive for markers, for academics, for faculty who want to do the right thing. So and there are a lot of perverse incentives like that, particularly associated with league tables, where the higher marks you give, the better quality you're seen to have, and that's not necessarily the case. The fear of external challenges, that partly refer to parents coming in, but also other people questioning your practices and making false accusations against you, just to discourage you from upsetting the apple cart, as we put it here. So there's lots and lots of disincentives. I'm sure you can think of more. So if you can think of any more disincentives that you're aware of, please type that in the chat box and tell us about that, because I'm sure there are lots more that we can share. So let's look at the other side. We'll go on to the next slide now, and we'll have a look at some incentives for reporting. So here we have some ideas, and I'm sure there are no surprises here, but there are things that I think are worth saying again and again. First of all, everybody needs to understand what their responsibilities are. And there's no point in saying it's not my job to do this. Everyone has a responsibility for academic integrity within an institution. So clarify everyone's responsibilities, make it clear what everyone has to do and what their responsibilities are for reporting and for finding these kind of cases. Make sure that the institutional policies and procedures are clear and transparent. And I know not every institution has policies and procedures at institutional level, but with as far as possible, try and make those policies and procedures consistent across the institution, so students are not confused and there is equity across the institution regarding the way students are treated. I think it's only fair that that happens. And I think the third one is really important. Do what you can to take the burden off academics, because you're less likely to get people ignoring these cases if you make it easier for them to report. One thing you can do there is you can appoint someone who has the duty to help get that evidence together. And some of these new tools from Turnitin and from others will help to take that burden off, because they actually help to produce that evidence without having to go through long, complicated procedures to try and generate the evidence. So that's one of the things that can be done. So it could be appointing extra staff to deal with it, to provide support for staff to get that evidence together. It could be buying new tools that help with that job. But taking the burden off the academics so that they don't have to do all that work themselves, particularly for part-time staff who are not paid to do that. I think that can help a huge amount. Remove the potential for the conflict between teachers and students. And one way to do that is to make sure the teacher doesn't confront the student, because I know that happens quite a lot, where the teacher will, first thing that happens is the teacher will go and accuse the student and talk to the student about it. That immediately puts up a barrier and starts a conflict with the student. In my institution, that might happen, but it's not supposed to happen. So there's not supposed to be that conversation between the person who's making the accusation and the student directly. It's done through an academic conduct officer who will deal with the case and take the problem away from the marker and the teacher. Training is important, and training appears here and in another slide that's coming in a few minutes. the decision makers need to work consistently, but also to be up to date with what's happening and to understand the way that the contract cheating industry and the other kinds of cheating are changing, so that they understand what the markers are, what the evidence is, and how to interpret it. But they also understand how to make decisions so that they do it in a consistent way to make it fair for students. I like the idea of protecting and encouraging whistleblowers to come forward, protecting the identity of the whistleblower, but not asking for anonymous whistleblowers, because in that case you can get all sorts of quite unfair and vindictive accusations coming forward. So people must be clear who they are, but and be clear what the accusation is and the evidence, but protect their identity as far as possible. Because I know a lot of students do want to come forward and talk about other students that they're aware of, that they think are getting away with it. And it's difficult to find those cases sometimes. But I've also said protect staff, because staff can also blow the whistle on other staff who they know are not actually playing ball, who they know are ignoring cases, or maybe worse, they might be colluding with students and helping them cheat. So protecting, or they might even be, and Thomas hasn't mentioned this, they might even be working for SA mills. So there's all sorts of reasons why we might want to protect staff who want to whistleblow on their colleagues. Work with students as partners, and I say this a lot. It's really important that we work with students, particularly students who are on our side and who really resent the fact that students are cheating, and they want us to do more to try and discourage it. So work with students as partners, get the students to help you, support you in the process of trying to discourage students from cheating in different ways, but particularly contract cheating, which is one of the hardest ones to find. And of course, as I said before, training and education for everybody concerned with the process, which is just about everybody within the institution. The next slide then. So thanks for this slide, Thomas. I love his pictures. So we're going to now talk about how we can deter cheating. We're not going to prevent cheating ever. So I've started to follow the Australian mantra that we don't use the term prevention, we use the term deterrence. So a better track record of detection is a good way to try and deter students from cheating. If they think they're going to get caught, if they're likely to get caught, then they are less likely to do it. At the moment, we don't know how many cases we're not catching, but I'm sure it's a lot. It's a high percentage. Hopefully we'll find out very soon, but hopefully we'll start to detect very many more cases in the near future. As Thomas said in his kind of closing statements, there are ways that designing our assessment can make contract cheating more difficult. We won't stop it altogether. As I said, there's no silver bullet, but we can make it more difficult and also make the work that we give students more interesting and get them more engaged. So that's a really very important point. And we can't really emphasize that enough. Just giving everyone exams isn't going to solve the problem, and it's going to make the assessment work that we give students much less rich. So we need to focus on the types of assessment that we know are good and we know work very well, but just make those types of assessment more difficult for contract cheating to happen. One way is to look at a holistic course assessment strategy where you assess not in discrete modules, but look at the way you assess the whole of the course and get students engaged in more practical work. I repeat it again, and I make no excuses for keeping saying it, training and education for all, both in the evils of cheating, but also in the skills that we need students to have in order to succeed. I'd make sure there is support for any staff or students that have problems with English language. And I include staff in that because it is very difficult when you're working not in your native language to spot differences in subtleties in language and so on. So support staff and also very much students who might be struggling in their language skills. so that they're not tempted to think that their lack of confidence is a good excuse for using contract cheating, and that should never be an excuse. Raise awareness and communicate about the problem openly. And a lot of institutions are afraid to talk about this because they're afraid that that will single them out as being institutions that have a contract cheating problem. I'm very lucky in that my institution allows me to be open about the problems that we have, because they understand and I understand that this is a global problem. It's not just about one institution. It's not just about one part of an institution. It's everywhere. And we need to be open about the problems that we have and open about the measures that we're taking to tackle them. But the International Day of Action is a good example of how to raise awareness, which is why I've been happy to support this from the start. It's a good way, it's a good opportunity just to have a conversation. And the fact that we've got over 100 institutions now signed up for the International Day of Action is a good indication that institutions are beginning to be more open and joining together and be less afraid to come out and talk about it and share their experiences with other people, particularly their successes. So we need to know what's working in institutions so that we can all learn from that. I don't think there's enough of that. So leniency, as I said, in my institution, if it's a new student, or if it's the first assessment period, or the first time they've been found guilty of anything, then we will give some leniency in the penalty that we apply. But the students must be aware of the gravity of what they've done, because it's still a very, very serious thing to do. But then if they continue to do it, then we'll just throw the book at them and they'll be expelled. So I recommend that's the kind of policy. But I do see, I've heard from Australia now that they're beginning to use a lot more support for students and help students. And they're having quite a lot of success in discouraging students from contract cheating by providing that support. And I think that's a very good policy. So we're certainly looking at providing more support for students in my institution. And of course, as I said before, working with students as partners, and certainly in the deterrence, that's a really important role that we can utilise, is working with our students, working with student leaders to help influence other students to stop cheating. Okay, next slide. So I like this slide. Everyone likes penguins. So I think this is really, really important that we understand that addressing contract cheating is not just one person. It's not just one person's problems. It's everybody's problems. And working together can help to make more successes of it. So I'll bring Thomas back in again here. So, Thomas?
Yeah,
You're there.
with you.
Okay, so
the mute button. Yeah, but yes, really we want to throw this open to you now for any questions. We have a few minutes left. Thank you, by the way, for some of the comments earlier. I managed to look at completely the wrong place while you were typing in your ideas and answers to that question. But one I'll pick up on from earlier on, we did cover most of it, is Brian mentioning work colleagues and subordinates as being another place that students get work done for them. And it's certainly quite true that you might know somebody through the workplace, or you might actually coerce or encourage somebody who's working with you or working perhaps underneath you to be the person to help you to contract cheat. All kinds of ways why you might want to help your boss out there. So yes, it's a complex industry. So now I know where the question box is. Please go ahead and type in anything you'd like to talk about. I mean, Irene's
questions or comments, anything you want to tell us?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, Irene's covered a lot about what we really need to do, which is to inform people. And that's why it's so fantastic everyone is here with us today. But do take the messages that we've shared with you back to your colleagues and back to your students as well. And I think also going through the whole detection part of this is that we do have to want to look for contract cheating. So it's very easy to just ignore it. We have to train people, and this also comes out of research from Australia, to try and find contract cheating there. And, you know, be suspicious. Think, could the student have written this? Is this covered in the course? And if you're suspicious, you can then go and look at the work in more detail and go ahead and hold things like vivas and other verification techniques to go with it. So,
and one of the things we haven't mentioned is one of the ways I was first connected to Thomas was that people kept telling me that this chap called Bob Clark had contacted them and said that they'd found some work on an essay mill. So that's one of the things you can do. There are masses and masses of essay mills, but if you know there are certain essay mills that are being used by students in your institution, you can actually get someone to monitor that essay mill to see whether work is being uploaded.
Yeah, and there's a whole host of very local essay mills out there, some of them aimed at a particular city, some of them aimed at a particular university, and you see them just setting up their business, and they get customers by word of mouth from one student to the next student, and or sometimes particular communities within a university who pass on the message that they've found a writer who's reliable, who they can hire. So they are very much out there. I'm seeing a few questions coming in. We've got Barbara there. Information on the Australian model. Some Stefana asking, can Irene or I come in to talk to students as well? I think I'm quite happy to, Stefana. I'm not sure where you're from, but I think if it physically works with our calendar, etc., we're both happy to either
Absolutely.
come in person or come in via webinar and share our expertise and just try and encourage students that it's valuable to you for your career now, well, for your time at university and for your future career, to do your own work there. And
can I just answer Barbara, who wants to find information on the Australian model. We have a visitor, Kath Ellis is coming over in November, and she is going to do a talk at Coventry University on the 13th of November. So Barbara, if you'd like to contact me, I can give you details of that. You'd be very welcome to join us for that if you're in the UK. I'm not sure whether we're doing a recording of it, but if we are, I can release the recording of it.
Yeah, and yeah, thanks, Stefana, being based in London. That's quite convenient for me, and probably Irene too. Nice, easy travel from Coventry. I remember when I used to work in student recruitment in Coventry. One of our big selling points was only 1 hour from London, so which is nothing. So nice, easy visit. And you're in London regularly, Irene, anyway, for many events. I know that. Yep. Brian,
so if you talk to us afterwards, very happy to talk to your students.
Yeah, Brian has asked how important are the different roles within the university, not just the lecturers, but course leaders, department heads, teaching and learning, development teams, IT, to monitor traffic to cheat sites, deans and institutional leaders, external examiners, etc. Well, I mean, that really is what we said about it being everyone's effort, and we see pockets of great practice in every university. There are people doing great things and pushing this, but they also need the support from higher levels in terms of the time, in terms of the training, in terms of knowing that when people do go ahead and find a case, that they'll be supported putting it through one of the academic integrity processes, as Irene mentioned. So that's that. And Todd has also asked us that universities band together to form networks. And
that's a great point, Todd. Completely agree.
Yeah. And the forming networks. I know, Irene, you formed the Midlands Network recently, which has been working really well there.
So what we've done in the Midlands is my colleague Sandy Dunn from Loughborough has started a network of Midlands universities in the UK, and we're having our second meeting on the 13th of November. We met in August, and we are sharing practice and sharing experiences. So we're very new, but the fact that we established in the first place and and there were 18 people turned up in August when everyone was supposed to be on holiday. So that's a good sign that there is a need for these kind of services.
Yeah, and do go ahead and form networks if you haven't got one locally. There are lots of great networks, a lot of work going on in Canada with Sarah Eaton. We've got the European Network of Academic Integrity in Europe, International Centre for Academic Integrity, which is one of our sponsors today or supporters today, in the US and elsewhere, and all kinds of regional groups as well. But form a group in your local university first, try and get students involved and helping out with that. And it all really ties in with what is coming up on Wednesday. Last plug, the International Day of Action, fourth one against contract cheating. Integrity starts with you. There's the official poster for the event, designed by students from the University of Wollongong in Dubai. There, but we're trying to get people, yeah, wonderful, getting all the students involved.
So if you'd rather spin it positively, you can call it the Global Day of Ethics if you prefer. And even if you don't want to sign up, you can still do activities and take advantage of the day and watch what's happening during the day around the world.
Yeah, talk about it with your classes. Yeah, go ahead and join Twitter. There will be lots of people posting photos of their events with those hashtags: defeat the cheat, excel with integrity. They're the hashtags the students came up with again. So both a positive and negative spin there. And join in with the discussion and think about next year. Because much as I'd like to say this problem will be solved in 12 months' time, I'm sure it will still be there with us despite all the great work going on. So thank you very much for joining us. We're at the end of our hour with you.
Everyone.
Yeah. Hashtag defeat.
Thanks for lovely questions and comments.
Yeah, and thanks to Turnitin for hosting us today and the International Centre for Academic Integrity. And I'll no doubt see you on Twitter on Wednesday. Thank you.
Okay, bye everyone.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining, and we'll be sending this recording out within 24 hours. Have a great day. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.